I was very much of an outsider in that society. And the only way I could fit in was by standing out, and so I got into trouble a lot. And I was the leader of the bad kid pack. And so that was a leadership of sorts, because I found out that this is how I am going to succeed in the situation that I was in.
She is a survivor of not one, but two civil wars. She immigrated to Canada with 3 children in 1996. No higher education, no powerful connections, and very little understanding of the business world. But her entrepreneurial spirit kicked into gear, and she founded her first company, which became internationally recognized as a Canadian creative powerhouse. And she has harnessed that same drive and that entrepreneurial spirit to create a business and lifestyle that has her living in places like Calgary, Montana, Toronto, and where she's joining us from now, Las Vegas, Nevada. And as a co-founder of the startup Skillet, she's a TEDx speaker, author, business consultant. She's been named one of Canada's most powerful women in the top 40 under 40 category, Woman Entrepreneur of the Year, and with a specialty in understanding the complexities required for building a talented, multi-generational, intelligent workforce. She's drawing on her experiences as a refugee, an immigrant, an entrepreneur, and community builder. Please welcome Zahra Al-Harazi. Zahra, where do we begin? Because that is one of the more remarkable bios that I've shared with our audience here on the Leadership Standard. And I'll dive here's what we'll do. We'll dive in. You're 17 years old in Yemen, in Yemen.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you pick up, starting when you're 17 years old in Yemen and getting married, how would you pick up the story from there?
Well, it was pretty easy. I mean, Yemen is a different society than where I went the day after my marriage, which was the US, Rolla, Missouri. And so, you strip off your veil and you're in this whole new world, new culture, new everything. So we lived in Rolla, Missouri for a while. I went to secretarial school because I didn't think I was smart enough to go to university. Girls are not encouraged that way in Yemen. Here we tell them to lean in and seek leadership positions, and in the culture I come from, it's quite different for women. And so we lived in the US for a while, went back to Yemen after that. Lived there during the war. My son was born during the war. And then we decided we wanted a better life. And so that's when we moved to Canada in 96. A better life for the kids. I was more thinking about my children's future as opposed to mine.
What was it that, when you think back, I'm always fascinated by those stories of the entrepreneurial spark. Something deep inside you, Zahra, told you, hey, I can do something more than be an employee, being a secretary, whatever it was. I'm just curious as to, can you pinpoint the kind of the eureka moment, or when you hit the slot machines in Vegas, it all came up entrepreneur?
Know that, first of all, I don't ever hit the slot machines, but even though I live in Vegas in the winter, I have better places to put my money. But it was a series of events. I don't think there ever was a eureka moment, other than, I learned leadership in a way early on in my life. I didn't fit into the society and the culture. When we left Uganda after the war in Uganda and went to Yemen, I was very much of an outsider in that society. And the only way I could fit in was by standing out, and so I got into trouble a lot. And I was the leader of the bad kid pack. And so that was a leadership of sorts, because I found out that this is how I am going to succeed in the situation that I was in. And then years later, when I went and worked at Trigger, Uh, and I was, like bottom of the heap, lowest employee, like first, last employee hired, the most junior person. And I just really got involved because I didn't know much of anything. I was so new to Canada. I was new to the business world. I was just learning as I was going. So I knocked on every single door. I'm like, can I help? Can you teach me what you do? And I think it was a series of things that just led me to one day think about, you know what? I want to do it differently. They're not going to let me do it the way I want to do it here. I want to try it differently. And that was the start of wanting my own company, was just experimentation. How do I do it in a way that makes me feel good? That I think is the right way to deal with employees or clients or design. I hated designing in 3-hour time slots because that was the budget, and timesheets. So I just wanted to do it in a different way.
So, in other words, I think what you're sharing with our listeners and viewers today, there was no grand strategy to get in the communications industry when you began, but that's where you wound up. I think everyone would be so curious to know, was your intuition speaking when it spoke to you back then?
Well, so I went back to school. I went to the Alberta College of Art and Design as a 27-year-old mother with 3 kids. So, I was in school with these uber talented 18-year-olds, and then there was me. And the reason I went back to Alberta College of Art and Design, or that's where I went to school, is again, I still didn't think I was smart enough to go to university. And my mother lied to me a lot when I was a kid and told me I was a good artist. And so I thought art school, that might work. It's a soft landing. And one of the things that helped me a lot is very early in my life, for a few years, I went to the American school in Yemen, where all the children of all the ambassadors and expats were. So I learned how to speak English properly. So I talked like everybody else. I just didn't know anything. I was just like the new immigrant that just came to this country that didn't know a thing. Speaking English properly helped me a great deal. So I went to art and design, and just thinking, okay, I'm gonna learn how to draw. And I discovered graphic design, and I just fell madly in love, because it was this thing where you could take a product and make people want it, make them want to buy it, make them want to eat at that restaurant. You could change people's minds. And that's what I loved about it.
I'd love to hear the story about your first big win, that thing that you created, Zahra, and wow, it worked.
Oh, there was a couple. There was a couple of really great moments. My very first design piece when I started working, I was working for a very tiny agency in Calgary, and the very first thing, the annual report that I had designed, won every single big international award out there. And that was such an incredible moment, because now I accomplished something on my own, because I grew up in a society where women were in the background, and everything I did for the honor of the family, or what was right, or like it was never about me. And all of a sudden, that was a huge win. The second one that I remember was when we started Foundry, and we were a tiny nothing agency, and we decided to pitch for the Travel Alberta job, and everybody and their dog in Canada was vying for this one, because it was a big, prestigious, fun job to get. And we just came in with a lot of bravado and belief in ourselves, and pitched it, and we won. And then we sat around the table and went, oh shit, how do we do this? So there's been a number of really amazing moments that make me really proud of what we've accomplished as a company.
There's an expression a friend of mine shared not too long ago, but I'd love to hear your take on it. How important is it for entrepreneurs, but also business leaders, to recognize sometimes you got to build the plane while it's flying in the air?
Oh my God, that's what I do all the time. Like, fake it until you make it was everything I did when I came to Canada and started my business. I pretended like I knew what I was talking about. and every time I needed to learn something, I knocked on someone's door. I want to buy out my business partner. I found people that knew how to do that, and I invited them for a coffee, and I picked their brains, and that those people became my fans, my clients, my friends. I just flew by the seat of my pants. I learned on the go. I made a ton of mistakes and a couple of really big wins. So yeah, I think that is it. Building the plane. I'm doing it differently this time with my new company. I'm building the plane first, and it's very different for me.
So you've written a book. It's entitled What It Takes to Live and Lead with Purpose, Laughter, and Strength. And somewhere in there, you talk about how you channel frustration into courage. I'd love to hear you elaborate on that.
You know, I I really had to fight for, like, I had to fight for who I am. I felt like that's what I needed to do in order to get anywhere. And because of that, I kind of took that spirit into everything I did, sometimes too far, because you can't be a fighter all the time. Sometimes you need to be a follower, and those were all leadership lessons that I had to learn as I went. I don't know if I talk about it as courage per se, but it was what I needed to do at the given moment in time with what life had given me at that particular moment. I had to figure it out. And so I took all the frustration of my past life, where I was always told no, and I hated that word, and never wanted to be told no again, and really tried to channel it into something that's going to be successful.
I'm going to ask a deeply self-reflective, maybe even psychological question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
How do you how do you think your experience as an immigrant refugee growing up in these countries where women's voices were silenced, how do you think, Zahra, that this has shaped your leadership style?
In a big way. In a big way, I've drawn many lessons, good and bad, from my past, and becoming who I am. It's interesting how the culture is different here. So I'll give you an example. My former business partner, after we had worked together for the first year, she came to me and she said, I have this reoccurring dream that I have this crab claw in my throat. And when I'm talking to you, and it's like, and it was frustrating her, because of where I came from. I come from a culture where you speak your mind. If you want something, you just say it, and there's a lot of passion and debate in getting to a resolution, and then people walk away as friends. That's what I'm used to. So I come to this nice, polite Canadian society, and, and I speak my mind. And if nobody speaks up, I walk away thinking, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. And a lot of people see that as more aggressive, and I'm like, but that's how it should be, that you speak your mind, you say what you want, and then the other person tells you, no, I want to do it this way, and you work it out. I think we spend too much time not debriefing on projects, not understanding how the team felt, not understanding how different people reacted to that, what was successful, what wasn't, and we shy away from debate a little bit, thinking that it is more aggressive as opposed to problem solving. And my attitude to life has always been about a problem solving mindset. Like, here's the problem. How are we going to deal with it? You might not like my answer. So I think a lot of that came into how I dealt with things. It's just different cultures give you different perspectives, right? And not being told no in my life also led to a lot of how my leadership was. I never believed that we couldn't do anything, because I just I believed that if we tried it, we would succeed in some fashion or form. And so
We have a signature question. So the name of the show is The Leadership Standard.
Yeah.
Signature question we ask every guest: how would you define leadership? In other words, what is Zahra's definition of leadership from her own personal experiences?
So leadership is very different and very unique to the person who is the leader, right? There is no one formulaic answer to that. I think it is all different, but it comes from the top, who is the leader, and it permeates through the organization. And I think a really good leader understands themselves, warts and faults and all, works to fix those faults, works to improve on their strengths, decides what kind of leader that they want to be. If they want to be a humble servant leader, if they want to be a flexible leader, if they want to be an innovative, forward-thinking leader, you kind of decide what those things are that you are good at. There's this great Japanese thing called ikigai, and it's your reason for being. And I'd love to apply that to both leadership and to companies. You know, what are you passionate about? What do you love? What can you pay for? And what does this world need? Right? So you decide what kind of leader you want to be, but then it is your job to be consistent and predictable in that choice. Because if you want to be a dependable leader and you think that you are a dependable leader, then you have to be dependable at every step of the way and every touch point. And I think that consistency is what some of us lose sight of.
You're about the third person in the last few weeks that has mentioned, is it ikigai? Am I pronouncing it correctly? No, you're about the third. It's one of those, as soon as you said it, I went, wait a second, why am I hearing this again? Maybe the universe is speaking. And maybe we all have to pay closer attention. If anyone wanted to look up that word and its definition, how do you spell it, Zahra? I'm just thinking out loud. I'll give you a minute to.
Ikigai. There you go.
Yeah, no, you're like I say, it's like this is, I'm sure, the third or fourth time in the last few weeks that I've heard someone refer to that. That being said, your new venture, but I'm guessing it's been something that's been there for a while. Like you just didn't come up with it. So let's talk about the complexities involved in building an intelligent, talented, multi-generational workforce. Like everything we're seeing from our perspective within worlds like Tech Canada, Vistage International, it's all about how do you win the war for talent? How do you really find the right people to come and stay and be a part of building your team and your organization? But I'd love to really hear your thoughts on that, Zahra, because I think a lot of people at this point of the conversation are also leaning in and listening to you right now.
Thank you. I really think that how you build your business makes a big difference in how you structure your team. How your personality is as a leader also makes a big difference in how your team are, because we all have to live the same values, and we talk about that a lot. We talk about company values and we talk about our mission and our vision, but a lot of times it's words that we throw up on the wall and none of our employees even remember, because we use the typical words like, we're going to be honest, and we are excellent, and we have safety, and it's the same words that are applied to each company. Employees don't remember them as much, and I think that's where the problem lies. Those values is how we should build our workforce, because they have to have that same passion and desire and values within them for the product that we're building, for the company that we're building. Otherwise, it will fall down. And if we have those, what are those values? How does it permeate through our organization? We all talk about words that we want within our companies, like flexibility and agility. And the companies that talk about agility the loudest are the ones that have none. There is just that they talk about it because they want it and they need it, but they don't know how to get that. Like agility is being able to make decisions quickly, knowing that they might be wrong, knowing that you might fail, but you want to be first to market. So it's a very startup sort of mentality. And I think once companies get bigger and bigger, We lose sight of that startup mentality. We lose sight on how our different generational employees are going to talk to each other, how they're going to socialize to each other, with each other, how they're going to work together. We build organizations that operate in silos. So, you know, the design department and the finance department and the legal department and the leadership team do not talk to each other. And that becomes a problem. And so really figuring out, like really doing a big, deep dive into your staff, who they are as people, what they want, what they're passionate about, and being able to fulfill that is a huge part of building that right team for yourself. And it took me years to understand that, because early in my career, I realized that I was not a good manager. You know, I was a good leader. I knew how to talk the talk. I knew how to bring in the clients. I knew how to do the design, but I didn't know how to mentor a team and bring them along, because I was focused on something different. And when I realized that, I became a better leader, B, delegated management to other people. So
as I hear you speak through that, by the way, I've made a note. I love the line, those who talk most about agility have none. So that's, everyone should tweet that out or post it somewhere here on LinkedIn, repost it and share that. But in that context, Zahra, as I hear you, I'm thinking right away, and maybe a lot of people are thinking this, well, can you point to a specific example? Like, who does this well? Like, if I wanted to learn how to play quarterback in the NFL, I'd be studying tapes of Tom Brady.
yeah.
Who would you recommend for us to be paying attention to in terms of doing well what you're talking about?
You know, a really good example is Patagonia as a company. And I know a lot of people talk about how Patagonia are as a shining example, but they really are a company that understands their purpose, understands why they were put on this earth, and whether you are of the same value and you follow the same values or not, you can see how it permeates through every single thing that they do. You know, from starting a daycare within their organization in the 70s for their employees, and having the people that were running the daycare be environmental psychologists, you know, to just how they run ads that say, don't buy this product. Recycle it. You know, they're just such a great company. And I don't know if your viewers knew this, but most recently their founder put the entire company in a trust and donated the entire company and its profits into perpetuity, into saving the environment, which is such an incredible feat. Ben & Jerry's ice cream, great company, great values, you know, and they live it, and they walk the walk and they talk the talk, and that's the difference.
That's very well said, because I know Yvon Chouinard. I've been following his story for quite some time, and I think his latest book is on my buy list before we break for the holidays. But let's flip it around. If you don't have this deeply ingrained purpose, like a Patagonia or a Ben & Jerry's, for example, what is the likely outcome? What have you seen?
You know, I mean, I'm not going to say that you're not going to succeed as a company, but I might say that you might not get to the same heights. And it's not always about the end result. I've never been only about the end result, about the profits, about the success. For me, the journey is a big part of my life. You know, how we build the company, how we interact. Think about how much time we spend in the office every day, right? You know, like that's where you live your life. So yes, while the end result and the profits and everything might be great, but how I choose to do my daily work, who I want to surround myself with, is a big part of that life satisfaction, that happiness, that contentment that eludes some of us, right? And so I really think that purpose is something important that a company should have, and it should permeate through every single silo that you have, because all these silos don't talk to each other, right? And they look at purpose as something fluffy up here that's marketing, and not actually how we do business. And so I really think that we need to think about how day-to-day work happens, because every single survey will tell you that when employees are happier, I think Better Up survey was that if employees were happier, they had a 53% more productivity, right? So when employees are happier, when they have purpose, when they have drive, when they have connection, when they have engagement, is when they do a better job. And when they do a better job, you are going to be a better, more successful company.
Has there been, you referenced the word journey a couple of times in this conversation. I'm always interested too, and I think our viewers and listeners are, in those moments along the journey where you really stumble and you really fall, the hardships, those times when you wonder, why am I doing this? Is it all worth it? Can you think of some moments, maybe of failure, setbacks, mistakes? There's no greater teacher, than a mistake. When you think back, what would be one of your greatest teaching moments, as it were, on this journey?
I'm glad you said one, because if I start talking about all of them, we will be here well into tomorrow. I think I wouldn't point to one. I would point to general learnings. I am one of those people, like when I was a kid, I would eat the thing that I hated most on my plate, because my mom would make dinner, she'd serve us, and we had to eat everything. I would eat the thing that I hated most on my plate first, just so I could get it out of the way. And then I would enjoy the rest of my meal, and I finished my food every single time. If I dived in and ate what I loved first, I never, ever left that table, because I just sat there and I couldn't finish my meal. And I approach life like that. I think deal with things that happen head on and get them out of the way, because then you can focus on what's important. Deal with it, delegate it. All of those were really hard lessons, because when I came, like I said, in 96, when I was a 27-year-old, I didn't even know what the word entrepreneurship meant, because yes, I spoke English without an accent, but I didn't have a lot of words in my vocabulary, right? So I just had to learn on the fly as I went and make those mistakes, and they were bigger than most of others, and kind of move forward with that. And so I just learned to deal with things head on, and I think that was probably one of my biggest learnings. And one last thing, I don't look at problems as problems. I look at them as opportunities. If you change that mindset, if you change the mindset of looking at something as an unattainable problem, and instead you look at it as a challenge to solve, it completely turns it around.
You just gave me an idea, Zahra, for something we can do with respect to crowdsourcing right now. I would love if everyone filled in their comments on business terminology they didn't understand at first. So, for example, Dane and I laugh about this all the time. There's words when, like, I got into business fairly late in my career. I was a 20-year broadcaster. And when I entered the business world, I realized right away they're speaking a different language. So when you say, I didn't know what the word entrepreneur meant, I think that there's a lot of people, if they're really honest, and I love your part about being head on, there's words that at first you had no idea what they were talking about. Mine was, I'll never forget, I was in my late 30s, and the phrase was skill set. Someone was telling me I could take my skill sets that I'd learned from broadcasting and apply them to business. The only problem was, what are they talking? I don't know what a skill set is. I'd be curious to know more about your experience. Were there other words that you just really had to, basically fake it a little bit, but then you learned the hard way what they were?
For sure. Actually, I have a funny story to tell you, and I have to plug my book.
Yes.
With HarperCollins. But when I did the reading, because I did the audio myself, and we had to do it over a two-day period before Christmas. So like I was standing, because they make you stand with your shoulders back so that your voice projects properly. But as I was reading this out loud, I realized that there was so many words in this book that I knew how to write, I knew how to, but I didn't know how to pronounce because I had never said them out loud. And so, so there was 1,000 takes later. I finally finished reading the book. But yeah, there's a lot of words that I didn't, and some of them I knew what they meant, but I didn't understand them, and a lot of leadership words, I just took at face value without actually understanding what it means to be a credible leader. Like, what does that mean in order for it to actually be applied to you, right? And things like that. So I really think that as a leader, we really need to understand ourselves and understand what we want to be known for, and understand what that thing means.
I think, Zahra, that everyone listening or watching can relate to that time when there was a business word and you didn't know what it meant. And you kind of had to smile and nod your way through it. Let's talk about your accomplishments. You've had many. If you could pinpoint the one accomplishment on your business journey that makes you the most proud, what would it be?
On my business journey, I have a lot of personal accomplishments that I'm really proud of. My 3 incredible, amazing kids that, make me so proud that I was lucky enough to be their mom. But I think from a business standpoint, actually just showing up. I think, being able to deal with things, being there, doing the hard things. Like, I do a ton of public speaking globally. The 12 years later, I've been with Speaker Spotlight, love you, Speaker Spotlight, been with them for 12 years. I still am not comfortable on a stage. I still don't love it, but I do it because it brings other things that I need on my journey. And so I think being able to do the hard things is probably the thing that I'm most proud of, like pushing myself out of my comfort zone, taking those big leaps of faith and the small baby steps, whichever it is. But I think that probably, I've given myself many memories and stories to tell when I'm old. And I love that. I love that, I haven't shied away from doing the things that I sometimes was sure that I was going to fail at.
Now, if you want to do the shout out for Martin and Farah from Speaker Spotlight, now's the time.
I love you guys. Speaker Spotlight has been a rock in my life. It's been the opportunities that the doors that they've opened, the people that I've got to meet because of Speaker Spotlight it's life-changing. Thank you, guys.
Let's do one fascinating story, the most fascinating person you've met as a result of that Speaker Spotlight connection. Who would that be, and what was the story that happened?
Monica Lewinsky.
Do tell. Those 2 words now have everyone listening intently. So where did it happen and what went down?
I was speaking at a conference in Regina, and there was 3 keynote speakers. Monica Lewinsky and myself were 2 of the 3. And we, after her speech, she sat down next to me at the head table. She had been there for my speech. I listened to hers, and she leaned over and she said, do you want to go for dinner? And I had a flight. I was booked to fly out of Regina that night. And I'm like, sure. Meanwhile, I'm under the table trying to cancel my flight and change it. And honestly, I have such a deep admiration for that woman. Hearing the story from her about what she did, Bill Clinton is a snake oil salesman that I would buy anything and everything from, right? She was 21 years old and she got the brunt of that. And I love how she has dealt with her life. I love her humor and her nature, and just one of the most impressive people I've ever met.
Her TED Talk was just fantastic. I highly recommend it to this day. Besides Monica Lewinsky, because I know you're an inspirational person yourself, Zahra, who else inspires you?
I love that question because I would say that everybody inspires me. I learned from watching my parents and my grandparents that everybody has value. And I learned something from everyone. I love talking to Uber drivers and learning their story and why they're doing it. My mother inspires me. My mother was one of the first women to drive in Yemen and one of the first women to work. My father inspires me. He came as a refugee to Yemen with all of us, our entire family, at $7. And he managed to, create this incredible life for us. I just think inspiration comes from everywhere. And we would disadvantage ourselves if we only looked at celebrities and people who are famous for inspiration, because you learn something from everyone, and it changes minds and perspectives and hearts, and I think that's what life is all about.
We're going to get up close and personal even more, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. So this is kind of like a next question segment. So this is kind of rapid fire first response.
Oh my God.
You get to have, Zahra, a one-on-one dinner date with anyone, dead or alive. Who would you dine with?
Who would I dine with? Oh my God, that's such a hard question. I would dine with Anne Boleyn. Did I say her last name right? Queen Anne?
Yeah, and yeah, I think you did. Boleyn.
I just watched her documentary, and I just think she's such a fascinating person to have done what she did and have the convictions that she did. And I just want to know how and why.
Okay, so people out there watching and listening right now are desperate to know. Let's just pretend that they have nothing left to binge watch. What would you recommend as top binge watching worthy series? What should people be watching if they are craving a little binging?
I don't watch a lot of TV. However, I sometimes do. I just watched, this is a movie, it's not a binge watch, but I just watched How the Crawdaddy Sings. I thought that was such a great movie. And Yellowstone. I mean, come on, I live in Montana in the winters, in the summers, I mean. Yellowstone, 1883, I loved more than Yellowstone. It's it's good TV.
Now, I'm hearing that the tourism in Montana has spiked somewhere upwards of 20% since Yellowstone in 1883. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, we have a 12-mile dirt road that you have to go up to get to our ranch. And there's times when we would drive up and we wouldn't see another human being or building or anything. And now there's cars up and down all day long. It's definitely, yes. There is a big spike in ownership, even home ownership. And
yeah, I believe that. Now, let's get back to next question. What books are you reading right now?
I am reading Grit by Angela Duckworth. I think it's a really great book. For a long time, just because of where I come from a society where mental health is not a thing. So I always thought that anything self-help was like belonged in this kumbaya world that I wanted nothing to do with. And it took me a long time to really understand books like that and the value that they bring. But I love anything that explores the human brain. I love all of Malcolm Gladwell's books. I love all the Freakonomics books. I love trying to understand how things happen and why they happen. Thinking Fast and Slow is an absolutely fantastic book. Yeah.
If I was to ask you what drives you beyond dollars and cents, what is it?
The journey. The way my life has unfolded, it's unfolded in a way that every day has become really important. Jane Goodall has this great quote that says, "Make today count," because you're exchanging a day in your life for it. And so for me, how I live my life, my everyday, has become really important. I really shy away from confrontation and stress. And I try to live a life that, has good moments, and I try to bring that in everything I do. And I really think it's helped me become a better leader. It's helped me be more calm when I deal with things. And so I can't remember what your question was, but I think that was the answer.
Tell me this. Let's just pretend. Okay, it's getting close to Christmas, and we're allowed to pretend a little bit. Let's just pretend you got a magical crystal ball for Christmas. If you could stare inside your crystal ball and see into the future, what would you like to know?
For myself, I would like to know when I'm going to launch my startup. Because, it's such a different animal than my first company, which was a service company. And so it really was based on the people and the talent. This is based on something different. We're building an entertainment company, but where you learn a skill every single time. And
Right.
they're really fun and unique experiences, and facing just delays, challenges, learnings. It's a tech business, and so it's very new to me. And COVID delayed us for a couple of years, and now building our platform is a bit delayed. So that I would love to know when we're actually going to launch.
Tell us more about Skillet. That's a nice segue, because we mentioned it at the top, but tell us a little bit more. This is the shameless, non-paid commercial announcement or whatever. But I think, honestly, Zahra, people would be curious to know what's going into Skillet.
So years ago, when I sold my company, my marketing company, I just wanted to do something that felt right, that felt like I was making a difference in the world, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I did a big research project for a big bank in Canada, and it was very much about upskilling the workforce and understanding the skills gap. And so I decided to build a skills company, but it's more for life skills, because a lot of us look for words like courage and empathy and leadership and communication, but we don't learn that in a book. We learn it by doing things. Every time we do something, we learn a little bit more of that, and then we eventually build those soft skills. And so I am building an Sarah Katyal, my business partner, and myself are building an entertainment company where you learn a skill every single time. And they're fun, unique, different types of experiences, but we want people to learn life skills, not necessarily lead to a job skills. So for example, if you want to learn bartending or mixology, we will teach it to you in a bar where you are the bartenders for the night and you get to keep your tips. We're going to teach your kids how to build a pop-up restaurant in your kitchen, and you're going to have friends and family come over, and the kids are going to budget, cook, serve, and charge them for their meal, and they get to keep the upside after they pay their parents back the original investment. So that's kind of what we're building right now, and I'm super excited about it. And we are launching in Vegas, the entertainment capital of the world, and then hopefully very quickly moving to Canada.
And best case, because now you've got so many parents keenly interested on how they're going to get fed and teach their children entrepreneurial skills at the same time. What's your best case for actually launching Skillet out there to the open market?
The spring of this year.
Spring of 2023.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I got a few more things. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'd love to know, what is something that's true? In other words, you know this to be true, but almost nobody agrees with you. What is that?
Oh, something that I know to be true that these are tough questions. Where was my list before this? Something that I know to be true.
This is part of the fun. It's true, but hardly anyone else agrees with you.
I don't think hardly anyone agrees with me, but a lot of people don't necessarily believe it at the time. But I honestly believe that we can all do everything and anything that we want, that there is no lock on whatever cage that you think you are in, there is no lock on that door, and you can get out and you can do what you want. Sometimes we get stuck either by circumstances or lack of knowledge or lack of courage or lack of confidence or lack of different things. But if we just push ourselves in those directions, it might not look exactly like you imagined it to be, but it will be a measure of success that is in the right direction.
If there's a thing called greatness in your world, Zahra, what does it look like?
I have a lot of greatness in my life. I actually do. I have a lot of great people, a lot of great things. Again, same as inspiration, I look for greatness in everything. Like my husband is one of the greatest people I've ever met. I have learned so much. I admire him so much. Playing tennis. I grew up in a country where girls weren't allowed sports. Yeah, I wore a burqa until I moved to Canada, right? And we weren't allowed gym class. We weren't even allowed to run. And so just joining a tennis team and learning about all of that and having these great people on my team and learning from them and like trusting myself to play a match, even though I know I'm going to lose and I'm going to disappoint my team. That to me, that's greatness. I honestly think that I am very blessed. I am very lucky. I am very privileged, the way most of us who are in this country are, to have enormous moments of greatness. And another moment of greatness is gratitude. And I think a lot of us talk about it a lot, but we don't think about it. So really quick story. My grandmother used to slap me upside my head if I ever complained, like with whatever she had in her hand. Sometimes it was a wooden stick, but she would be like, you better be thankful. And I actually learned that, when something stressful happens to me, the very first thing I say is Alhamdulillah, which in Arabic means thank God. And it's less religious and more about just being thankful for me. Oh yeah, it's not a big deal. I have things that I'm very grateful for. So I think perspective is greatness. Lots of things. Look for those inspirations. We tend to look for the negatives. The best part of life is those inspirations.
Oh, you and I could go all day on this topic, this alone. But having said that, I want you to think now of a specific moment in time. I'm going to ask you the question and see if you can instantly recall the specific moment. In other words, what is the closest thing you've ever experienced to real magic?
To real magic, the closest thing. Oh, that's a good question. Closest thing. Yeah, I was the Canadian ambassador to UNICEF for 4 years. And doing that, I got to travel to a few different countries and see different lives so that I could share their stories when I came back to Canada. And we went to Jordan 1 year. And that was such an incredible trip. That whole trip was magic because it was a longer trip than just Jordan. But we went to the Syrian refugee camps. And those camps had been there for 3 years. Some people had been there for 3 or 4 years. They weren't even allowed to bring a brick into the camp because they were afraid of them putting roots down and it becoming a city, right? So they had to live in the tents. And the magic was watching the people there. Kids playing football or soccer, as we call it here, with slippers on or no shoes on. Just the way people lived their lives with nothing was pure magic. It was, it was just, it was heartbreaking for me. We weren't allowed to bring a bottle of water with us because we couldn't eat or drink in front of them because we couldn't share, right? And so just knowing all of that and walking in there and seeing how people lived their lives. We went to visit this one family. They served us tea with sugar, which is very difficult commodity for them to get, right? So yeah, that was pure magic. That was. Then right after that, I went to Rwanda, where my oldest daughter was working for 4 months. And that was magical, watching her navigate that country, watching her get on the motorcycle, the taxis, and, how we navigated Rwanda, and watching my child, take a bath out of a bucket, my very spoiled child, I might add. And after that, I went to Bangkok for a board meeting for Entrepreneurs Organization, right? It was just these different kind of experiences that were absolutely phenomenal.
We live in a world of both challenge and opportunity. And Zahra, I think that's one thing you've articulated very well. It all depends on the mindset, how you look at it. As we wrap this up today, and I know you deeply care for entrepreneurs and business leaders because you've walked where they're walking right now.
Yeah.
What is the number one question business leaders need to be asking today?
How to delegate. How am I going to delegate? How am I going to build a team of people that are going to help me do this? We are an army of one. A lot of times, even if you have a business partner, you're still an army of one because you're wearing so many different hats. Some of them do not fit at all and you hate them, and you never want to put it on your head again. And it's really hard to build a business. A lot of people look at entrepreneurship as this very sexy thing where you get to be CEO of your own company, and it is hard work. And I really think that business leaders need to figure out where to give themselves moments of grace, where to find some help, how to delegate, how to bring in the help and the answers that you need, how to build that safety net around you of people that are going to support you and lift you up. Sorry, that was many answers to your question of one thing, but there is no one thing. There's many things.
Zahra, we could talk all day, but listen, thank you so much for taking the time. We really enjoyed this.
Thank you. I did too. Thanks so much.
Our thanks to Zahra Al-Harazi for joining us today on the Leadership Standard. And if you want to know more about Tech Canada and its world-class programs, check out the website, www.tec-canada.com. What was it that Zahra spoke of that made you stop in your tracks and think? I loved it when she said, hey, companies who talk most about agility have none. But what was your biggest takeaway? Feel free to share your thoughts with us at podcast@tech-canada.com. We do check those emails. And boy, if you have a business word that had you stumped early in your career, we'd love to hear that too. So if you enjoyed the Leadership Standard, please feel free to share with others in your online and your social networks. So do all the usual stuff, like, subscribe, and share so that, who knows, we might be able to inspire someone else to grab hold of the clutch and go full throttle in this new frontier. On behalf of everyone, Melissa, Stephen, Alexander, executive producer Mark Johnson, Catronell, all the little elves behind the scenes at the Tech Canada office in Calgary, Alberta, as we get ready for the visit from the big guy from the North Pole, thank you so much for joining us here on the Leadership Standard.